Hi, my name is Question Telka, and I'm the owner of Reconcile Financials, a bookkeeping and accounting firm specializing in nonprofit and real estate investment. I share tutorials in order to help empower clients and other accounting professionals. Today's video is covering how to fill out a W-9. It's the second part in a three-part series. The first part covers what is a W-9, and if you haven't seen that video already, I'll provide the link to it in the description. And then later this week, I'll be providing a video covering 1099s. If you're a business owner or nonprofit and you are receiving payments, many times you're going to be required to fill out a W-9. We're going to go over how to properly fill out the W-9 based on federal tax classification. It's really important that you fill out your form correctly. The reason it's so important is because the IRS uses what is called TIN matching, and that's taxpayer identification matching. And what that means is that the IRS is looking at the name or business name in conjunction with your social security number or your tax ID number and determining whether or not that's a match. If you do not have a match, then the person making payments to you may receive a notice from the IRS telling them that they're required to take a backup withholding from you in the future when they make payments to you. So that's why it's really important to make sure that your form is filled out properly. I'm just going to jump right in here by sharing some examples of how the W-9 form should be filled out based on federal tax classification. The first one I'm going to start with is a nonprofit organization because I just don't feel like they get enough love, so they get to go first this time. The box 1 should be filled out with the organization's name, and then a nonprofit should be choosing the option Other in box 3, and then fill out Nonprofit Corporation exempt under IRS code section, and then whatever the code section your particular nonprofit is exempt under would be the code that you would fill out here, 501c3, for example. And then we're going to jump down to the employer identification number. So you should have an employer identification number, pretty self-explanatory, and you just fill that information in here. This does need a signature, so be sure that you're signing the form before you provide this to someone. Now we're going to talk about a sole proprietorship and single member LLC. This is where it seems to get a little bit more complicated and confusing for everyone. So we're going to go over a few different scenarios. The first one is going to be a sole proprietorship or single member LLC filling out the form using a social security number. So you're going to put your name, your first and last name in box 1, and then you'll put your business name in box 2 if you have one, or a DBA. If you're a single member LLC, you might be the Bluth Company LLC. Then in section 3, you're going to fill in the first box that says individual, sole proprietor, or single member LLC. And I know if you're a single member LLC, what you're thinking. Well, what about this box down here that says limited liability company? I'm a limited liability company. Should I choose this one or should I choose the first one? The second box here that says limited liability company is for single member LLCs that have elected to be taxed as an SCorp or as a CCorp. If you've made that election, you'll know because it is a process in order to do so. So if you are being taxed as a single member LLC and it's going through Schedule C on your 1040, or you're a sole proprietorship and the scenario is the same, you would choose the first box on the form. Then you'll fill in your address, and you definitely need to use your social security number in this scenario. And we'll talk a little bit more about why next. Then you will add your signature and the date. Now we'll talk about a sole proprietorship or single member LLC with an EIN that would prefer to use that to fill out the W-9 form. Sometimes a sole proprietorship has signed up for an EIN, or a single member LLC has an EIN assigned to the owner, and for security reasons, that person may not want to use a social security number on the form. We're going to talk about what the form should look like, and then I'll go on to explain why it should be filled out this way. So if you take a look at the form, the business name should go in box 1 if you're using your EIN, And then in Section 3, you will choose, again as before, individual sole proprietor or single member LLC, input your address, and then add your EIN here. If you're filling out your W-9 form with your social security number, then you have to put your first and last name in box 1. If you are filling it out with your EIN number, which I understand many people prefer to use, then box 1 has to be your business name. The instructions for the W-9 seem to tell us that you cannot use a business name in line 1 or a disregarded entity name, as you can see on the instructions that I've highlighted here. But they also tell us that we can use an EIN and that that's acceptable, even though they do prefer a social security number. The problem is that if you submit your W-9 to the person who is issuing you a 1099 with your first and last name in box 1 and your EIN number, then they will get a rejection that says, or a letter from the IRS that states that they do not have the correct name and taxpayer identification number match. And I know this because I tested it, and I tested it because I felt like the instructions were confusing and they seem to contradict themselves. So when I did this test, I submitted a TIN match on myself with my first and last name and my EIN, and it sent back a mismatch. When I resubmitted it with my business name in line 1 and my EIN number, it was a match. And it is also a match with my first and last name and my social security number instead. So to sum it up, if you're going to submit your social security number on your W-9 form, then put your first and last name in box 1. And if you're going to submit it with your EIN number, then put your business name or your disregarded entity, your LLC name on line 1. Otherwise, it won't come back as a match. Now we're going to talk about multiple member LLCs. With a multiple member LLC, they're automatically taxed as a partnership at the federal level. So what that means is that a Form 1065 is the tax return that is created rather than it going on an individual's 1040 tax return. So because of that, in box 1, the company name needs to be filled out rather than the owner name. Then limited liability company would be checked, and then a P for partnership would be put in this box. The address of the business would be included, and then the federal tax ID number would be filled in. You won't have a social security number to put in here because it's multiple members. So definitely a federal tax ID. LLCs have the option to elect S corporation as a tax filing status. They are able to do this whether they're single members or multiple members. We already discussed that if it does happen to be a multiple member LLC, and they have not made a election to file as an SCorp or CCorp, then they do automatically file as a partnership, and that is the form that we discussed prior to this one. However, they do have the option as an LLC to file their taxes as an S corporation election. If they do so, when they fill out the W-9, then in box 1 under the name, that should be the company name. In section 3, then they will choose the limited liability company and enter S for S corporation, the address, and the federal tax ID. So even if this is a single member LLC with an S corporation election, they should still input a federal tax ID number rather than a social security number because their taxes are completed on an 1120S and they are not completed on a 1040 individual return on the Schedule C. Much like the LLC with the election to be taxed as an S corporation, the LLC with the election to be taxed as a C corporation looks very similar. So box 1 is going to be filled out with the company name, limited liability company checked with the C designation, and then the address and the federal tax ID. I'm going to move through the remaining selections a little bit more quickly. If we look at a corporation or a C corporation, This is not to be confused with an LLC taxed as a C Corp. Then the name of the corporation would be in box 1, and then C Corp would be checked, and then the address and the employer identification number. Next, we take a look at an S corporation. This is not to be confused with an LLC, taxed as an S corporation. And we have the same information in box 1, S corporation, the address, and federal tax ID. And then the 2 remaining, partnership would be the business or partnership name. The partnership box would be checked. This is not the same as a multiple member LLC, taxed as a partnership, which would be filled out how we discussed previously. Then the address and the employer identification number. And the last one would be a trust, which would be the name of the trust in box 1, the address, employer identification number, and then the trust box would be selected. Thanks for watching. I hope that this video helped you gain some clarity on how to fill out a Form W-9. If you have any questions, leave them for me in the comments, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for a follow-up video soon on 1099s. If you are interested in learning more about our services at Reconcile Financials, you can go to reconcilefinancials.com or send us an email at info@reconcilefinancials.com. A special thank you to Nancy McClelland at the Dancing Accountant for collaborating with me on this video. Thanks.